Today we're talking crypto, and I'm super excited to get you on this new crypto channel because I think you're one of the best people at explaining the complex topics in a way that people can understand. And we also have a very similar story, which I think will help us in educating people. So let's take you back to where your crypto discovery started. Like, how did you find this crazy world of crypto?
Yeah. So I had a friend, and he was working at a VC firm at the time. This was right after we had graduated from high school. He was actually interning there. And after he finished his internship, we were like working together at the school. We were like doing maintenance and stuff. And one day he talked about how there was this big news event that like Vitalik Buterin had died, who was the founder of Ethereum. And so at that time, I didn't know anything about it. And so first off, that was false, to be clear. It was a false headline. Yeah,
He's
he's
still
still
alive.
with us.
Yeah.
And but it tanked the market. And so this also kind of talks to how early we were in the game, where like some random headline about the founder of the protocol that's supposed to be a decentralized protocol died, having such a drastic impact on the price. But anyways, so he was in it, but I was like, wait a minute, like what is actually happening here? Because I had heard of Bitcoin, some of us had used it, this and that, but it was like, why is there more than just a Bitcoin? Like something's going on. So anyways, went deep down the rabbit hole, never came back.
And then here we are today. Yeah, I know it's been a wild time for crypto, obviously, but with Ethereum is probably the next best one to talk about because it's the one everyone knows. And I had a similar discovery point to you where when you first discover crypto, everything is Bitcoin. You think Bitcoin is the same as every other thing. And then I heard about Ethereum, and my friend actually bought it before I did. Paul, shout out Paul. And he had made some really good money, but then by the time that I bought some, it had come down quite a bit. I think he was right about break even, and I decided to buy 3 ETH at around 200-ish bucks. And then once that starts, you're pretty well down bad forever. You start researching like crazy, you become obsessed with the whole thing, and that's where I am. So when you found Ethereum and you saw that this is a crazy opportunity because of the volatility that happened from something being irrelevant, if you understand it, impacting the price like that, how did you take it to the next level? How did you start learning more
Yeah,
about the
it's
craziness?
kind of wild because when I really think about it, like I have no idea. Like I just like started like I guess YouTubing. Okay, I remember one moment in particular where I was watching Andreas Antonopoulos, and this was 2 years later, so I don't know what happened in between there, but I was going hard. And I was watching this video about him kind of talking about like cyber gangs and how like the future of the world could be like these gangs that are like not necessarily physical in the real world, but like that go around and like start hacking people and stuff like that and taking their crypto or like holding them for ransom and things of that nature. This was 2019, and like I'm sure that was already happening before then, but now we've seen that happen on like a almost a a systemic level with very large Fortune
Mm.
500 type companies. And so, anyways, I just remembered having that. Andreas Antonopoulos is like the OG. Like he was the one who really was teaching people about Bitcoin back when no one had a clue, and he knew it very well. And he was the original like cypherpunk, meaning like these people that are like all about privacy and having ways to transact and communicate, also communicate in ways that can't be censored, right? So it wasn't just like the forums and the places where Bitcoin was a big deal was like these forums where communication, like censorship resistant communication, was already a really big deal. And so having like this next iteration of like, oh, now we can actually transact with one another, like that was like the golden piece of this puzzle of being able to have this like world where we actually have sovereignty over our communications and even our transactions, because money, the transaction of money is a form of communication, right? I'm communicating value to you when we're transacting money. So anyways, he was a fundamental figure in me actually understanding the real value of Bitcoin, and that was 2019. But he had been doing that for since 2014, probably even earlier than that.
Mm. So if you were to explain the value of Bitcoin to someone watching this, how would you explain it?
Yeah, I think the major thing is censorship resistant, a censorship resistant monetary system that is also permissionless with a limited supply, right? So words, big terms, actual concepts. Here we go. Right now, there's an intermediary whenever you're using money. There's two intermediaries. One is whoever you're actually using to help make that transaction, being like usually a bank, and then the second one is the actual counterparty of like the one who's backing the currency, which is the central bank. So with Bitcoin, you've kind of eliminated both of those. You've eliminated this need to have an intermediary to facilitate the transaction because now you have a network that is the only intermediary is the software that's running the program. Okay, as far as you could look at it as like the miners who are helping to validate transactions over that network. You could look at them as your intermediary, but that intermediary is not like a specific person or a specific entity. It's a conglomeration of tons of different entities essentially that are all participating using the same open source protocol, meaning that anyone can run this protocol and anyone can kind of participate in this process of validating these transactions. Now, the second thing is that you also have a mathematically based system so that there is no like a person that's making a decision about what happens next regarding the supply of the currency. So you don't have this counterparty of the central bank that is responsible for the inflation or deflation of the system. That's all based on mathematical code that's built into the system that can't really be changed unless 51% of all of the participants or more come together to change that. So it's a new system for money that exists outside of the traditional system that we have of fiat currencies, and even before that, any centralized based currency where there are planners and people who make decisions about what happens next. We've completely eliminated that and brought that to code and into math. So that's the major value of Bitcoin as it exists today.
Super well said. Yeah, and then it also eliminates emotional elements and like psychology games that exist within the current financial system for the most part, which is probably the scariest part, right? Because people are emotional creatures and we're not logic driven creatures. We act on emotion and then try to justify based on logic. And as we've seen throughout history, that does not bode well for good decision making. And I think because you understood that, which I tried to dig beyond the prices as well last time there was a bull run, but most people didn't. And I think that's why they left, was because they thought, oh, it's just a scam. Because if you just watch price go up, price go down, yeah, you would say you're gambling. But gambling to the masses is usually strategy to the few. Like, you can understand that this is an investment in the inevitable. Like, which project wins besides Bitcoin? Like, that's, who knows? Like any business, which one will win? Who knows? But this is like how I saw it, was like the internet was obviously so obvious to the people who grasped the concept back in whenever it was originated. It would have been so obvious to the people who took the time to learn it. Like, no shit, this is going to happen. That's the same kind of place that I came to with Bitcoin, and that's why I stuck around. Why do you think so few people did stick around when the price movement went away?
This previous bull run, I don't know. It feels like a lot of people did go away and are not coming back. Because we hit a certain level of critical mass, and I mean, I'm sure it will continue to happen, but for so far this bull run, I haven't felt that. I don't know, some people have said that they've seen it. I haven't felt it at all.
No, not at all. I think I actually have a theory for this, and
No, please.
sorry to cut you off, but I think it's largely because when the last big price movement happened, everyone was stuck at home taking up new hobbies, and they only had one centralized problem, right? Now that everything's come back up, people have like 12 different problems at the same time vying for their attention. So getting them to sit down and get educated is a very tough ask. Like, that is a really, really difficult, which is why I started this show, because there need to be more voices that are actually trying to give the good sauce to bring you to your own conclusions and not trying to push you to specific ones. But the benefit that you have if you're watching this is that Keith and I had to do a lot more work than you have to do to reach the same level of understanding. Because you guys have ChatGPT. Like, anything that we're saying here, you should do this. Have your phone out while you're watching this episode on your TV or your computer. And if Keith says something you don't understand, instantly pause it and go into ChatGPT and say, explain this to me like I'm 12. If you do that shit, you're going to love crypto really quickly.
Yeah. Oh man, there's a couple things in there.
Yeah.
I lost them all.
They'll come back. They'll come back. But I think you're dead right that they have not come back, and I think that they will.
Well,
Go ahead.
well,
You go
no,
ahead.
it's just that another thing to tack onto that is maybe it has to do with the economy, right? Because 2020,
Totally.
everyone's getting free money, right? And then so now, not only do not people have free money coming in, but job market is coming out to be way worse than anyone's been told. So there's another
Yes.
part of that too. I just wanted to put that in.
No, that's totally accurate. But I still do think that everyone will try to come back, even if they don't have much money. And people always have a way of finding money, even though they say they don't have any. People typically can find a way if they feel the opportunity warrants it. It's like they teach you in sales that no is always bullshit, and that's typically true for the most part. People do have access to money, whether it's the safest way or not. People find a way, and I do think that the price movement will be so aggressive that even people who said they would never come back will come back. And hopefully there's enough voices like yourself out there that are educating people to make better decisions so they don't get as screwed. Because if you did get screwed last time and you're watching this, dude, you have so much more learning than the people who are entering just now. And you have two choices. You either use that as a massive advantage, or you let that define your view on something and say it's a scam because you were one of the few that or one of the many, I guess, that lost. Right. And I could have done that same thing. You could have done the same thing. We have a very similar story where we rode the roller coaster all the way up and I rode that shit right back down. Like I literally didn't make anything. And so I'm so lucky that I guess that I over-index to optimism and opportunity. So I was like, okay, whatever. Like this is just a lesson to learn more over the next 4 years and stack up. But if you don't do that, then what you did was now a complete loss where it could be a massive win. So hopefully people do come in and get
Yeah.
educated. You've talked a lot.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
remember what you were going to say next. I just wanted to
Yeah.
point out too that like, okay, so we both went through the ups and the downs, but I bet you didn't lose any conviction throughout that time.
Not
You
even
know,
a little
and
bit.
it's
No.
that's the thing. It's like if anything else, like, oh snap, like I need to really scramble now to like figure out how to acquire more
Yes.
because it's time.
100%. Yes. And I think one thing that's so important is that the world lacks nuance because algorithmic distribution of content is void of nuance because nuance doesn't perform. And so the problem is that almost all value is very laden with nuance. Like you have to think critically to deeply understand something. Let's use something like the NFTs as an example, right? NFTs, it was cool to hate on NFTs. And so anytime it's cool to hate on something, there's going to be an overwhelming amount of support for the hating on it, right? Where let's and the NFT is such a farther reaching technology than what we saw in terms of the PFP, like buying NFT thing. But even that, let's say, people did not look at it through a lens of any degree of understanding. There was so much ignorance thrown around. Like, let's say that it is only that use case, okay? And it becomes digital equivalent of fine art. The only reason you don't see the fine art prices tank during bad economies is because they don't get sold, right? They're not a live marketplace. So everyone was like shitting on the NFTs and being like, oh, like who the hell's going to buy this? It's like, in my opinion, I think you're an idiot if you don't think it's going to come back in a very major way. NFTs, not all of them, most of them will be absolute shit. Same with art. But if you look at the foundation of what art is, you have to grasp what it means to the people who care about it. And I think a lot of people miss out on a lot of money because they try to see the world only
Yeah.
through their eyes. And there are so many investment opportunities when you try to learn other people. And if you think like rich people, you're like, okay, yeah, they would totally like this shit, right? And there's also going to be a new wave of rich people that come through through crypto, and what they value is going to be so different. Like I can say this, the people that I look up to, they don't really flex Rolexes and stuff. And so for me, when I do come into the wealth that I hope to work and achieve, I will not be buying a Rolex. It just doesn't matter to me, right? Like honestly, this sounds so dumb, but I would way rather have a pudgy penguin than a Rolex.
Wow.
I would way rather have that because to me, Rolex means nothing to me because the people that would attract, I don't really care to attract them, right? And so for me, I think that, and I obviously that sounds insane to people listening to this, but I do think there's a lot more people that are going to have similar views that I do currently in the next 5 or 10 years because they won't look up to people who have had Rolexes, right? Like we're probably the last few generations where that like really, really matters in my opinion. I think digital flexes will become a bigger deal.
I think that's
Is that
crazy,
crazy?
but I don't think that it's wrong. I mean, you got to think of, especially the younger generation. I mean, dude, anyone younger than us, I think that's a real thing. Like, I never really got into the NFT thing. I had some friends that kind of like looped me into at the very top of the market, which was a lot of fun, and everyone still makes fun of them in the group chat. But, but,
Yeah.
I mean, it happened. Now, my theory around some of what happened too, and I talked about this publicly at the time, was like there's a little bit of like funny business that was going on, where people were like bidding up each other's pieces.
It was
Yeah.
rigged as shit. It was rigged as shit. Yeah, I learned that's how I started making money.
So yeah. And so sometimes it's also like, okay, how do you get aligned with that and get your piece and get out? The other thing that I wanted to comment on what you were saying was, man, you get my brain going, bro.
I love it. You do the same. That's why I wanted to have you
Let
on.
me think. It was something about the fact that price go up with NFTs. I gotta find that thought.
Yeah, it'll come back to you. But it's you have to find the equivalent of what it means today, and then also we have recency bias out the ass as human beings. One of the most important things you can do if you're watching this with crypto or anything is go research cognitive biases and understand that those are what's driving your car. Like you may think that you have this free will and you're the snowflake and you're the exception to every rule. I promise you're not. So the quicker you learn your own cognitive biases that are keeping you down, you can counteract that, and you can also predict behavior way more. So like let's go use the same example of NFTs, right? It sounded insane when I said, "Oh, I'd rather a pudgy penguin than a Rolex," but a Rolex was an idiotic concept like 100 years ago, or however long. Like obviously, I don't know watches enough to know the specific times, but let's say a few 100 years ago, someone paying that much wealth for a TikTok thing on their wrist, like that would not have been a common thing, right? It only reached common everywhere because they saw people doing it that
Right.
they looked up to. If that
Right.
happens with this, that's really what it is. People like try to bullshit me and say it's all I love the technology of the watch. I'm like, you're full of shit. Like that's not why you own this watch. So in my opinion, I guess I'm not a watch person, so maybe I should shut up. But I don't think that's actually why they're buying it. They may say again, I think that's the whole reinforcing your emotional based decision with logic, which we all try to do. In my opinion, that's what I think it is, and I think that'll happen the exact same way on the internet because there's less friction.
I won't name drop this guy because a lot of people know about him, but there's this guy who he's in the marketing space, and he was like, he's a big flexer. Like he does real stuff. Don't get me wrong, but he's a big flexer. He likes to talk that smack. And he was like talking about how one day he was in the mall and like there was a group of guys standing together and they all had on nice watches and they all like kind of recognized that about each other and started striking up a conversation. And he was like, you know, this is why I wear these watches. It's because like this leads to these types of conversations with people and so on. And I was like, okay, that rationally justifies having the watch. And I've never thought of things in that way because I don't look out for that. I don't value those things as well in the same way. But you know, I think it's interesting to say that, you know, we're talking about culture now, and that is something that I find fascinating. And when you see culture mixing in with technology, once again, like in the space where things are supposed to be very logical, I think you get things like pudgy penguins, you get things like the bored apes, and I think I don't really watch the prices of NFTs. I kind of more look at like is this still a thing? It sounds like bored apes is kind of still a thing. And I just find that to be fascinating.
They've been hit. Yeah, they've been hit pretty hard. I will say that the price has been hit pretty hard, and I will also say the holder sentiment has been hit pretty hard. But they also do. The difference is that for their project, they gave a lot to their community, but they also asked for a lot of their community as well. And so with that, then the expectations rise, right? And Luca goes on and on about this because it matters so much. And Luca from Pudgy Penguins understands the psychology behind consumer behavior better than maybe anyone. And he saw that he gets the assignment that for this to make sense, for the whole ecosystem to feed off of each other, you got to make the people who hold it really wealthy and not ask for anything, because you want important people who are wealthy to talk about it because they want to, right? You can't beat word of mouth advertising, right? And this is essentially what an NFT can do. It's the alignment vehicle where if it becomes really expensive, you in turn made someone high status, and by default, they're going to talk about you all the time, right? And the higher their status rises, the more value that you bring into your ecosystem. So it just makes so much sense that the alignment vehicles are possible now with meme coins and NFTs. And if you just think about the future of IP, which is intellectual property, people, you are crazy if you don't think that's going to happen through crypto or blockchain technology or NFTs. Because if you think back to Disney, let's say, Man, this is a Disney. I don't know your opinion on Disney adults, but I think that concept is crazy to me. But like, obviously, teach their own. I'll never yuck your yum. Do your thing. But like, these people are spending ungodly amounts of money for like slight perks within these parks, or to get married at these parks at like 2 a.m. in the morning. Like, it's crazy shit. And so what all that says to me is that people love what they love tremendously. And so if you don't think that these kids are gonna get, or even kids, I'm referring myself in this equation, that who's going to understand our problems better than us? No one. So the next wave of content that actually becomes serious is going to be aligned content through something like this, where they can speak to us. The people who are above us in terms of age and status, like they are so out of touch that the people calling the shots at these big media companies, there's a reason why you feel like every movie is ass, because it's made by somebody who's so out of touch with reality. The next wave of great filmmakers are going to be some dude with his phone and a penguin on his phone, right? Like, that's what they're going to do. And then naturally we're going to align with that, because that's going to be our Mickey Mouse is going to be the pudgy penguin. And now you can actually be financially incentivized by that. That's one thing I want you to think about here, and then I want you to take over, is that these people with Disney are already insane, right? Their whole identity is the worship of this IP. Imagine if they were getting paid.
Right.
Basically, right? It would be another level of obsession. So that I just think that people have not thought about the culture element of what this would create.
No, you've illustrated something very powerful there, and the first thing that comes to my mind is Pokemon, right?
I fucking love Pokemon.
And I actually very recently learned about this, because I was never a big Pokemon person, but I have a good friend of mine who like started getting back into it, right? We're about the same age. He's like 26. And he's like, dude, like, by the way, like, there's a secondary market where like people are making crazy money and paying crazy money for these cards and these, you know, unique cards and unique packs or whatever, mystery packs and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, interesting. You know, you hear about it with trading cards when it comes to like, you know, sports people and stuff like that. And even that is like something that I would have never really been into. But to think about something that was completely fictional, right? Like totally made up, cartoon characters and games that like have had this physical trading card kind of manifestation of a product that has turned into a secondary market that is, you know, taking over culture. I mean, the guy Pat Flynn. Do you know Pat Flynn from Smart Passive Income? Okay, so
of course.
I used to follow him very closely, and I only just recently saw some podcast where he started this new channel. And, you know, he's grown it to like, I don't know, like 1 million plus something subscribers on the channel. And it's all about Pokemon. And it's wild to me. Like, there's just a whole market for this aspect of culture, and how like you were saying, how like creating this mechanism where these people can actually get paid just to be a part of it is crazy to think about. And the Pudgy Penguins thing that I'm now seeing, I'm now getting this. I'm just not getting this. When you have the token that's fungible alongside of that, now I can just buy in a little piece of it, and I don't have to have the whole NFT and still participate in the community. Wow,
that's it. That's why it makes so much sense, because at every layer of financial abundance or situation, they can have some stake in its growth, right? And so because it's the meme for everyone, which is the Pudgy, you need the meme coin to have the alignment vehicle at a very approachable price point. And you also, the meme coin makes the next layer up cooler, makes the next layer up cooler, makes the top level really cool. Because if there's like a bunch of people who have made some pretty good money from their alignment with this, every person now looks up to the top people even more, which makes that even more valuable, right? And so you also have to, approaching this the right way for the goal of the project also really matters, because I was thinking about this yesterday on a walk, where I'm also a big believer in Gary Vee and Gary Vee's project, V Friends. He obviously gets roasted because he was the public voice of NFTs before everyone started roasting them. So he bears that weight. But I study content all the time. He's starting to talk about Web3 a little bit more again. He was quiet for like 3 or 4 years because he was only getting nothing but hate. But it's about to come back, and he's about to be able to throw out all those throwback clips saying, I was right, I was exactly right, I was exactly right. And that's going to bode very well for his NFT project. But why I bring him up here is because although on the outside it may say like Pudgy Penguins and V-Friends are the same thing, but here's the nuance of doing things the right way from a collectible or a consumerism point of view. His whole brand is not for everybody. It's for the people who like really value their values, who want to work hard, who want to do these things, right? So for a meme coin like him, it actually wouldn't really make sense. It does make more sense for him to have his VFriends Series 1 as the high target. Then he has VFriends Series 2. So he has basically his meme coin is a lower barrier to entry NFT project where there's like 20,000 of them. And what he does really cool is that his different things have different utility for it. So if you own a VFriends Series 1, because he's in the collectible world better than anyone, it's actually fucking genius what he's doing. The chess level move that he's making is that if you grow up in a household of collectors, you always think collecting being an obsession is normal. Okay? And so if all these homes exist all over the world, and there's a common theme where they're like, I don't know what to show my kids, right? And so now if the parent that loves collecting can collect something with their child and the media off of it has the values that you align with, the alignment vehicle there happens without even any money being spent, because the real meme coin in the VFriend universe is their high quality content in terms of morals, ethics, lessons to the children, right? That's the game he's playing, because when that happens on both sides, they're going to want that forever. And then he's also playing the long game of utility. So he's making his cards and his stickers and his collectibles very, very collectible. And he's also, because he's lived in the flipping world, he knows what manufactures high price points by limiting supply, doing drops, knowing what people like. He recently just removed a swear word from one of the names of his characters, and I think that was completely deliberate from the very beginning, where they included it just to say they could take it away, because then there now creates more intrigue for the original ones that were printed with the swear word, right? Like, you need these little games and these stories within an ecosystem to make it spread, because you need things that people that like about, like, you need the people that like about it, or that like it, to be able to talk about it all the time. So Gary's thinking about this shit, but what I'm coming to is, this is like the big utility, this is big meta, is that if I hold VFriends Series 1s, and so I don't collect the VFriends cards, but I probably should start, because they're getting flipped on eBay for way more. And as a VFriends Series 1 holder, you always get access to the drops before the general public. So now let's say you're a collectible store owner on either online or in real life, you sell cards and shit. And these are all over the world. It's going to become financially irresponsible to not hold a VFriends Series 1 if you own a collectible store. Because you're getting access to these drops at like either limited access or a price point, and it's going to become like literally something they have to buy. It's going to be a business expense.
Very, very interesting, dude. Yeah, this is well beyond like the stuff that I think about. but that's really cool to hear about, for sure.
Yeah, I live in the culture side, and I think which is why I've picked certain things that I've picked. And so I think where we complement each other really well is because you're more on the finance side. So let's shift over to that stuff. I want to hear about the projects that you're obsessed with and why you're obsessed with them.
I tend to keep a lot of this information very close because
okay, so keep me vague then.
So here's how I look at it. The biggest thing about crypto and blockchain, if we're going to see that world where you have, this being the major way that all transactions are being done, is the major theme is interoperability. And so you have, at this point, I think there's literally on CoinMarketCap like 1 million different cryptocurrencies, which is crazy. And a lot of them will exist on specific chains of some sort. So maybe we could say there's like 10,000 different blockchains or something like that, maybe less. And so with that, if we're going to have a world where, like governments or like, the NASDAQ is using this technology, then we're going to have to solve a few different problems. One of them is getting information. First off, everyone might want to use their own chain, right? So like everyone talks about like CBDCs and like governments around the world using CBDCs. Well, just like they don't use each other's currencies. I mean, they do when they have to. They're going to have their own. They're going to have their own blockchain system. They want to have their own rules for how they're playing the game. So that's one thing, is like we got to have interoperability between different blockchains, and that also breaks down into different levels. So you have the messaging. like the actual information on the chain. That's one thing. The next thing is like the actual value that's on the chain, right? Like I need to get the actual token and the value of that token from one chain to another potentially. And then another layer is kind of like the ordering of transactions through these different, like if I'm sending this to this place, I need to make sure that the order of that transaction is properly done so that when it gets there, it's like done in a sequence that aligns with everything moving forward and not having some mess up where you could double spend essentially. There's different layers of interoperability between different blockchains. And then you have information coming from outside of blockchains. So we need to figure out how to get information from the real world as it exists today in databases and so on into blockchains if we're going to use blockchains the way that we say that we can use them, which is to like have real-time transactions that are based upon real prices of real assets as they exist today. So interoperability is the major thing that I like to play around with. There's tons of different solutions, but my favorites are the ones that are, how would I say, focused on cross-chain interoperability as well as bringing in information from the outside world. And if you can do that in one solution, then that's fantastic. And the other side of this is this private to public blockchain. So we just went super deep, but like, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep doing it. The private blockchain is a whole ecosystem where people are like, no one's using this technology. Like banks aren't using it. It's like banks are using it. They're just not using it on the public versions. Okay, so we have private versions of Ethereum. We have private versions of all different kinds of blockchains. There's this company called Corda. There's a company called R3 that has a solution called Corda, which is, I'm pretty sure, the core of their entire business. That company makes money. The reason that company makes money is because there are people out there, there are large organizations out there that are using private blockchains to transact with one another today. Okay, and so the flipping of the switch that people talk about all the time is like, okay, how do we get that over to the public blockchain, right? Because it might be as simple as flipping a switch and saying, hey, we're going live and parsing these transactions from this private blockchain over into the public blockchain. So you still have these private transactions taking place, but now they're being represented, they're being pushed through to this public blockchain. And if you have that situation, then you might have a way to then value the transactions that are taking place in that private blockchain on a public ledger. And in that situation, right, if you're using some public token on the network to do all of that, then that can provide massive value to the token, not only because you have private transactions that are taking place that are now being represented on chain, so you know the value and the demand of that currency on that public chain, but also you have the public participating in that valuation process, potentially buying and selling this asset and having more people that are saying, oh, okay, more liquidity essentially for what's happening in this private system. So there are solutions out there that are built and designed to address all of those things in one, and that's my favorite thing to look at.
And can you name any of those?
One thing that I'll name is a project called Chainlink. I think that's one that a lot of people know about. I think it's a fundamental piece of the infrastructure for what happens in the future of this technology. You can't really have that world that everyone talks about without something like Chainlink.
Without, totally agree. Yeah, I think that's the one that the mainstream doesn't really know. That should be a pretty obvious one. So I definitely recommend looking into it. Luckily, their founder is very public in terms of he talks a lot on shows and conferences, so there's a lot of opportunity to hear him speak. He's also pretty involved, from what I understand, in the push for legislation in the U.S., where he's involved. He's speaking to people, and so take from that what you will, right? Like I definitely would want to be aligned with that.
And to be clear, Chainlink is working with the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation in the United States, the entity responsible for clearing all securities transactions, processing over 1.2 whatever quadrillion in transactions every year. Chainlink is partnered with them on several different pilots that they've done, and they talk together. Like Sergey Nazarov is the founder of Chainlink. He's on the DTCC website on multiple occasions. So just putting that out there.
Mm. Yeah, no, and obviously none of this is ever financial advice, but we can try to, and that's why I named the channel Don't Buy This, just to make it very clear that I'm not telling you to buy shit, but I am telling you to go get educated and definitely take Keith's advice and go learn. And Chainlink's one of my favorites. I'm still holding some Chainlink. I have been for a very long time, and I still have the same conviction I do when I bought it, even though I lost money on it, because if you're playing a long leveraged bet on a fundamental shift in technology, the time horizon like shouldn't dictate your decision. Like, I would say that's why I would say never put in money into crypto that you need within the next even I'd say year, maybe even years. But that if you're able to approach even a small amount of money over that kind of time horizon, you can change your life completely with crypto. And there's a lot of people doing it all the time. The ones that lose are the ones that try to gamble all the time. The ones that are trying to get in, get out, be traders. You got to be really smart to be a trader. And one other thing too is that you're still early if you're finding this video right now. Currently, we're filming this. It's June. What am I saying? September 10th. And it's still very early. September 10th, 2025 is still very, very early. But the world is going to wake up to this opportunity. And then it's going to get really hard. Because why is it so hard to pick stocks unless you're picking from the Mag 7? Is because it's so hard to do because there's so much competition and there's so much nuance because there's so many people playing and so many people competing. Crypto is still pretty isolated and pocketed where there's a lot of people who are not the best in the world at what they do per se, but they're the ones who are here solving this problem now. Eventually, it's going to get so loud where the best of the best is going to enter this space and it's going to get even harder. So I would definitely say there's some urgency to get started, get educated, which is what we're advocating here. One thing we didn't really touch too deeply was you explained Bitcoin really well in terms of what it does. Can you explain a little bit more in terms of how it was invented, when it was invented, and then the gray area attached to that?
Yeah, I mean, I could touch on it to the extent that I can. There's a lot of people who do like super deep history on like who Hal Finney was, and there's a.
Have you found any good ones? Like, who's your best resource for that, or videos? Have you seen any?
No, I really don't dig into it too much because to me, it really doesn't matter as much as the fact that we don't know and that the person hasn't moved the crypto. So, we can speculate on it. I actually was just having a conversation with someone about like Craig Wright and how he claimed like he was the owner of the founder of Bitcoin, and like he went through a whole court case where he was supposed to move. He was like, okay, well, you have to prove you own it, so you have to move the Bitcoin from one place to another, and that was like the way of proving it in court. And he couldn't, or he didn't do that, and it was like, oh, well, I couldn't do that because of this and that. Anyways, no one knows really. Someone knows. Someone out there knows for sure, but we don't. And 2008, right in the middle, really, of the financial crisis, there were people who had known about what was happening, right, for years. There's a guy named John Paulson, I think is his name. That might be the wrong name. And he was, making this short trade on what was happening in the financial markets for years, going into 2008. So there were people that were aware of the fact that there was a crack in the system and that things were not going the way they were supposed to be going. In 2008, near the end of 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto, this pseudonym, dropped the white paper for Bitcoin, and then I think it was in January of 2009 that the actual network launched. And he waited to mine the first few blocks or something like that, to make sure that people were paying attention to what was happening, and he gave them time to catch up. But the idea here was that right in the middle of a financial crisis, when governments were about to step in and did step in and print insane amounts of money to save and support companies in the United States and abroad, this monetary network as an alternative to that system was launched. So the timing of it, and apparently in the white paper, he mentions something about the financial crisis, essentially. And it's just clear that there was kind of some sort of planning that was done around the launch of this network. And to be clear too, the way I see it, the complexity of this wasn't something that you can, even from a technical perspective, to develop it. You wouldn't really be able to do that within a year. I don't think. If it takes you longer than a year to build Facebook, then dude, it's going to take a very long time to build this network. And then on top of that, we have to go back to the inception of the whole concept, right? Because that's going to take years of thinking. That's cooking and ruminating in someone's mind for years before you get to the point to where I can put these different technologies and pieces together. And then so to take it back even further, Peter Thiel was out there, by the way, talking about, he co-founder of PayPal. So we're not going conspiracy here. He was talking about having a way to transact on the internet without having to use banking systems. And so if we go back even further, the internet is built off of cryptography. Like cryptography is a lot of what makes the internet work in a way to where it's secure today. And so cryptography, modern cryptography, was happening during the Cold War. And the United States and Russia were trying to find ways to communicate with amongst each other without revealing what it was that they were actually saying. And out of that was born the concept of the internet, this public-private key cryptography, and using that in a way to communicate over the internet, over fiber optics cables. And so that's the way I look at it. It's like, okay, let's go back and like trace the different pieces of the technology and kind of like how it came about to being how it is today. And funny, I'm just like thinking about this out loud. Okay, you had Ethereum that came after Bitcoin, like smart contracts, like decentralized finance. Like, okay, so a lot of the stuff that we see in decentralized finance comes from like how banking works. Like you kind of like have gone backwards and say, how does banking work? And then you say, oh, okay, well, these are the different mechanisms that are necessary to create these types of transactions and so on. Anyways, so public-private key cryptography and the creation of the internet out of an organization called DARPA in the United States back during the Cold War. This was a military project, a military, like, I guess you could just call it a project. And that's where the internet came from originally, was a defense project. And so when you just kind of like move that forward, I read a book called Currency Wars by Jim Rickards. I highly recommend that. It's a great book. And he talks about how in 2014, it might have been a little bit after Bitcoin came out, 2011, not too long after Bitcoin came out, he was working with the Department of Defense as an advisor, and they were going through these different economic scenarios of how a government around the world could try to launch some new type of a currency to overthrow the US dollar's reign. And so, that's 2011, don't get me wrong, but like there are people in the world who get paid to, come up with these types of scenarios of how to overthrow governments' currencies, right? And they get paid now.
Yeah.
So, that just kind of like really made me think. I think when I read that book, I've never read a book about crypto, by the way. I've never read a book about crypto. But that book, for instance, like just opened my mind to thinking about, like this could be way deeper than what it seems like on the surface. So anyways, that's my little like, tinfoil hat thing about Bitcoin and the launch of the network and things like that.
I think it's impossible to not wear a tinfoil hat these days when you see every universal truth, and I'm saying that in air quotes, that we were told was full of shit. Like, how could we not think that this is something like that? And it also, we're constantly reminded as to the lengths that people whoever's running this shit, I don't know who it is, definitely not the puppets that we see, but whoever is running this, they really showed no limits to what they'll try to do to maintain the control over that system. And I've been watching a lot of lectures from Professor Jiang, I think his name is. I can't remember the specifics of how to pronounce it, but I love how he interconnects things, because really when you break it down to it, psychology drives the world as long as humans are driving the world. And so it also becomes a lot easier to predict as long as you don't follow the cognitive biases that we mentioned earlier. And during the financial crisis, it must have been so abundantly clear, I'm sure it already was, but it starts to reach the general understanding of this is not sustainable. Like how our whole world functions, the financial system, it is inherently not sustainable. And so, much like you said, when you're on a sinking ship, obviously you're going to build another ship. You know what I mean? Like come on, if case in point, like let's use an example. If the guy in the Titanic, the movie, the captain guy or whatever wanted to bring on more safety boats or whatever, but they're like, oh, this is unsinkable, so we won't bring it. If they knew it was going to sink, I'm sure they would have brought the extra boats, right? And so if you have the luxury of time, which is what we're seeing in late stage capitalism here, I think you'd be ignorant not to at least question the fact that this could possibly be done by less obvious means, like you're alluding to.
Yeah, and then it kind of brings us back to the whole, like, how does the system work today, or how has it worked before Bitcoin? It's like, well, some people came together in a room and like made some stuff up. Like,
Straight up. Yeah, I know. That's the craziest shit is that we literally dictate our entire lives over following these rules that some dudes just made up. And chances are they were half as smart as you or I or anyone watching this today, just in terms of what they had access to, right? And we're living our entire life based on these systems. And some rules should stay forever, but we're definitely due for some improvements. And that's really what sold me on crypto was I'm like, sure, it's definitely pie in the sky, but I was like, oh, maybe we can improve some of this bullshit.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's undeniable that there is a math-based backing of this currency, right? So it's like whether or not like the mining process really like adds value to the world, I think is definitely something that's questionable and leads to thinking about different ways to implement the same type of of censorship-resistant monetary system alternative. I think you can do that. You can find different ways if you really are against the way that the mining process works, but having that mathematical based method of at least like the issuance of the currency, I think is very, very, that's a big step because now it's not Jerome Powell and his friends feel this way today. And therefore,
Yeah,
yeah,
so we're gonna
you
lower
know,
rates.
or
It's
now
ridiculous.
the actual problem, the problem has always been this, but the problem is it's becoming a problem is like someone who's not even a part of that decision making process saying, hey, this is what you need to do. Uh, so,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, it's a cool thing to watch unfold, and I think you make some good points about like at the end of the day, you know, we just gotta things are going to continue to iterate, and when it comes to money, like it's always an experiment. Yeah,
old.
and it's
Yeah.
it's old and it's always an experiment. It's like people used to trade, you know, freaking like it's always subjective based upon what people decided that they wanted to start to use as money. So that kind of comes back to that culture conversation of like, and it's so wild because Bitcoin as this experiment, right? Like for it to even have gotten to where it is today, it's massively successful. And so like to ignore it for one is crazy, but then also to not like question
Yes.
like how did we get from like just like how did we get from this thing that launched in the middle of the financial crisis that no one really knew about besides a couple of hackers on hacker forums to a multi-trillion-dollar industry with businesses built on top of it that are like starting to now impact and affect the real world. Once we got the stablecoin bill passed, dude, like that flips everything on its head.
Legitimized it,
Because
for
like
sure.
now the systems are actually intertwined by law.
Now everyone's talking.
Well, yeah, because the thing is too though with the Genius Act, now stablecoins in the United States must be backed with treasuries. So by law, right, stablecoins are now the traditional financial system. But it wasn't that way until really that happened. Now it's like, oh, by law, it's intertwined. You can't ignore it.
Yes. And there's enough people who currently people still trust that are going to start championing this technology and the shift that's coming. And yeah, it's so much bigger than I think that we even give it credit for. And it's also really needed. Like look at the problems in a lot of these systems. Like it's crazy. I think a lot of people don't actually even understand the system. So you mentioned censorship and that being a big element of Bitcoin. But I think to the average person, they're like, well, why would censorship ever matter? I'm not going to be impacted by this for one. So I want you to touch on that. And then after you do that, explain to people watching this why there only being a limited amount of Bitcoin being a very important thing and how that's very different from how money currently is. Because most people don't even grasp that concept.
So the censorship resistance, yeah, it's fun to talk about this for me because, I mean, I hate to say it's fun to talk about, but it's just like I happen to be very blessed enough to spend some time in a place called Miami, where I got to meet people from all over the world. And this was around the same time that I also was learning more about crypto. And so to me, it just became very clear there were people that I was in the room with that were saying, dude, like back home, I can't use my money to do this, or our currency is being inflated away like this, or if you try to, you know, the government can, you know, come in and just take your bank accounts and whatever, like if you're trying to like speak out against them or whatever. And so I just, you know, if you don't have those types of issues around you, then you don't really know that it's a problem, right? But it is a problem. And, when we kind of like step back and listen to people and some of their struggles, there's countries all over the world where people don't have freedom of speech. There's countries where the way that is inflicted upon them, that power is taken from them, is through their banking accounts. And so that's probably, yeah, I mean, that can be one of the most highest uses of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, is this ability to have a network that you can't like stop anyone from transacting on based upon some arbitrary decision or some government entity, because there's no government entity that controls the network. So that's the big thing there, I would say. And then we talked about the second thing was the limited amount of the currency, right? So the fiat currency system, which was super officially kind of put into effect in the mid 70s when Richard Nixon depegged the dollar from gold, essentially meant that from that point forward, all currencies in the world kind of traded on a floating exchange rate that was based upon the supply and demand of the currency itself, but that currency not being backed by anything in particular. Like, you can't take that currency and go and trade it for something at the central bank like you could for gold at that time. So the dollars that we have in the United States and in any fiat system is only really useful in that it can get you, you can use it to pay taxes. Okay, so the full faith and credit of the United States government is what it's for, or what it's backed by. And so, yeah, so now, with that also comes the fact that there's no backstop on how much of this currency can be printed. The beauty of having something like gold as a money is because in order to create more gold, there's energy that has to be put into that. There's resources that have to be put into getting more gold into the system, right? I have to go and dig up the gold. And when I dig up the gold, that means that I have to put resources into it. And so if that's the case, then I'm going to stop getting the gold out of the ground if that gold is not valuable enough, right? So what happens is you have a self-regulating system, and this comes from Jim Rickards' Currency Wars, is where this was like taught to me. You have this self-regulating system so that if there's more and more gold in the system, then the price of that is going to go down. But when you have not enough gold to be able to facilitate all the transactions that need to take place in the economy, then the price is going to go up, and therefore I'm going to be incentivized to go and mine more of it. Okay, so it regulates itself. Whereas with the fiat currency, there's no regulation mechanism. It's just if I want to print more, the only issue is how much that leads to a rise in the prices in the economy. And this comes back to what people call modern monetary theory, where if a country has the ability to print its own currency, then the only limit on how much it can print is basically how much that impacts the economy in a way where people start to where the fabric of society starts to collapse, right? But that's the only limit. The 3%, 2% inflation target, another thing, right, kind of just came from some Swiss banker. And not only that, but it wasn't even like they were saying that this was the thing to do. It was just like an example that they put out. And then all of a sudden everyone ran with, oh yeah, 2% inflation target. Anyways, so you've got an unlimited space of fiat currency because the government, or the central banks rather, can print this money to support bond markets or whatever, whenever they feel like it. And on top of that, well, the alternative to that is that you have a system that has an inflationary mechanism, a disinflationary mechanism that is disinflationary, meaning that the amount of this currency, Bitcoin, that's coming into circulation is going down over time. Deflationary would mean like the amount of the currency is going away, but that's not what's happening. What's happening is the amount that's coming into circulation is going down. So the mining process means that you'll get a certain amount of Bitcoin for every block that gets mined. That number gets cut in half around every 4 years. Great. So we have this unlimited space of fiat currencies, and we have this limited space of crypto. And you could say only Bitcoin. Some people say it's only Bitcoin. Okay, fine. Only Bitcoin, you have this limited space. What you have is a world where these two things exist at the same time. So when you have an ever-inflating currency and you've got something that's limited on the other side, this limited currency becomes kind of a vacuum for where all of this liquidity that's coming into the system can go. So assuming in that situation that the value or the demand, of Bitcoin stays even just the same, then the prices of that thing has to continue to go up over time. And so and that's not including like Metcalfe's law and this idea that the more participants and users of a network exponentially grows the value of that network. So on top of that, we do have people adopting the Bitcoin network and cryptocurrencies over time. Right now, it's like less than 40% of the world is using cryptocurrency. And so the point being that this idea of having a limited currency space, a limited type of money in a world of ever imprinting, ever inflating away money means that things can kind of only go in one direction. You can ignore it. You can act like there's no value to Bitcoin, but either way, this is just a physical kind of manifestation of what's occurring is how I look at it, at least.
Super well said. And I think people get very confused who don't dig a little bit deeper in terms of if they look around, everyone is broke, everything's super expensive, all this stuff, but yet we have record highs in the stock market. When you understand how money works and how the system that you just explained works, it's an inevitable reality. Because, like, let's say even when they lower rates and it becomes more, there's more access to money, and that flows into risk-based assets. But who's buying these assets? It's people who already have money, and so they understand that they need to put all their money in assets because the value of the fiat currency is worthless. And so it's basically a big race to how quickly can I get into an asset class as soon as humanly possible. So then it creates this self-fulfilling prophecy where basically none of us are going to sell it, and the only people who can afford it are people who already have it. So then it just keeps going up and up and up and up and up. And that's the shit show that we're in right now. And so I also think, like, culturally, that will really bode well for people who will invest in crypto, because I think that we do have that kind of counter financial culture narrative going for us, where I think a lot of people will be like, okay, this is like the only chance we kind of have. So I think that'll lead to things, but it's scary how ignorant the majority of people are when it comes to money. And I'm sure that because you love this stuff, people do come to you, or they're a little curious and they come to you. And I typically see everyone hates the topic of money. Like they just don't want to talk about it, and they always say, "Oh, it's for my business, my finance guy, or it's for someone else to deal with." That's a very dangerous game to play, and I think that things have become really hard because so many people didn't know what they were even signing up for, and so because of that, people who did were able to take advantage of them. Like, you can't get taken advantage of when you understand the rules to the game, right? It's like, how do people cheat? It's because they don't get caught, and you can only catch someone if you know that they're cheating in the first place. So it's really important as the person to get educated, and the sooner that you do, you're going to make better decisions. And all right, so we dropped there for a second, but what I was trying to say is that you need to, information can only reach you at the level that you're at to receive it. And so until you become educated on how money works, you're naturally not going to be interested in how crypto works, and then you're going to miss out on a lot of opportunities. So getting educated fast is going to be very, very important. And we talked about this on my main podcast, but for this, I want to focus it specifically on crypto. How do you approach finding the real opportunities in crypto for 10x's, 100x's, et cetera? How do you approach finding the diamonds in the rough?
Yeah. I would say the major thing is just looking at official documents from large organizations. That's where I've gotten all of my alpha. Yeah, dude, it's the 100-page IMF papers about digital equity and the digital divide. And it's like, but when you go through those documents, and even if you just Command F, bro, and like look through, like, look for some stuff that you want to see, you might find it. And so, yeah, man, those are the types of things that I did. World Bank, IMF, Bank for International Settlements. That's the big one. I'm throwing you guys a huge bone there. The Bank for International Settlements and all the work that they're doing around central bank digital currencies. It's all out in the open when you actually like do the research.
It is, because they know people won't read it. Like all the information is hidden, where like layers of friction is usually where you're going to find the best stuff, because they know they can hide it and say, look, it's right there for everyone to read, because they know no one's going to read it.
It's wild, man. It was in 2017 when things started to hit for me. I'm going to drop a couple of things because this is a huge part of who I am and why I am where I am. A good friend of mine that I went to high school with, we found this stuff and we dug deep. The other friend, funny enough, he was the one who basically told me about it and made me go down the rabbit hole. He kind of like was whatever. But me and this other guy were like, yo, like, what's going on? And it got to the point to where he had an opportunity to speak with a governor of the Federal Reserve Bank, one of the regional Federal Reserve banks, because they were at his school. And when he did that, he brought up a very specific name and concept and topic in this space that we're talking about here. And it was because of that conversation that he nailed himself an internship at that Federal Reserve Bank. Now, that was one piece. The second piece, and the second piece was that he started to develop a little bit of a network of central bankers around the world, and also just had connections to some of them through his family, whatever. And one of them told him, we talked about this a little bit earlier. You brought up this concept of like, this will all happen when things go wrong, potentially, right? Like this is when the switch gets flipped or whatever. And one of the insights that he took away was from a conversation with a central banker at another country in the world, total separate part of the world. This was in 2019, by the way. All this is in 2019. Those exact words were what came out of the central banker's mouth. He said, as soon as like things go to like completely awry, that is when these technologies will be adopted at the maximum level. And so, it could have just been his words. It doesn't really matter. It was not like his law, what he was saying. But, from someone who's a senior banker in a global central bank, you got to remind you, like, this was in the East. This was in the East. He was saying this. I kind of forgot where I started to go off on all that. Oh, we were talking about like looking at the documents and just like reading the research, because yeah, they do put it out there. And this was the time in my life where I realized like, oh, they speak to us. They tell us this stuff. And that was mind blowing to me when you see Christine Lagarde openly talking about certain companies and certain technologies even, and what they mean for the future of technology. And I'm doing my best to share this information with people on my channel, while making sure that I'm attracting the right people as well, and people who are thinking critically.
Totally. That's the goal of this show too, and this channel. And it's just why they're able to hide in plain sight is because it's behind layers of understanding, right? And so they just know that they may put it out publicly, but they know that only like 5% of the world can understand, and even less will try, right? And so then that creates the situation where they can hide in plain sight, and that happens way more often than you think for a lot of things in government, or because they can. And so that's why education is so powerful, and becoming good at getting educated is really powerful. And that's why I do advocate people using AI to learn, at least in the beginning. I don't recommend trusting AI exclusively, because they still do hallucinate and make shit up all the time. But
Yeah.
but in terms of getting a basis of understanding, if that's what will get you from 0 to 10, I think you'll carry yourself the rest of the way. And so if that's what gets you there, then fantastic. I would advocate what Keith said, is going right to the boring shit. But I'm also not ignorant to the fact that most people will be so intimidated by the language that's used and the jargon that's used. So what you could also do is go to the paper, bring it into ChatGPT and say, summarize this for me, or dumb down the language to a different level, because most things in life are explained in far more complicated terms than they need to be, because that's how you control who understands it. Is if you physically can't get the words that I'm saying and the energy behind them, then you don't get access to the true information. You can hear the words, but it won't hit you on a vibrational level, and then essentially you didn't hear it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir, man.
That's it. Well, as we wrap it here, man, I want to have you on again in the future. If you guys want to see Keith on the channel again, just comment down below. We'll get him back on here. I've also been pushing Keith to start his own podcast or stream, so hopefully that comes out very soon. And if he does, then we'll definitely add it to the link of this episode. But I just want to thank you so much for coming on, Keith. Where can everyone find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, man, I'm at Keith D on YouTube. That's my number one place to go. Also at Inner Operator on Twitter.
Sweet.
And yeah.
Dope. Links to everything is down below. Thanks so much for coming on the channel, Keith, and we'll have you on again soon if you'll come on.
Most definitely.